It was upon the 7th of November, in a year I dare not name, that I came at last to Ravenhurst, that grim and crumbling pile bequeathed to me by my late great-uncle Ambrose. The carriage abandoned me at the iron gates as the storm broke overhead. Lightning carved the sky into white and trembling fragments, and the rain fell in cold sheets that drowned my footsteps. The house rose before me, black silent, its windows like the empty eyes of the dead, and I felt, for one brief and terrible instant, that I had not arrived, but had been summoned. Mr. Ambrose Pell, my great-uncle, had been a man of many silences and few friends. The solicitor who handed me the keys had pressed a folded letter into my palm, his voice low and urgent. He bid me give you this, he had whispered, and to deliver one warning. Do not, upon any account, remain within the house when the great clock strikes the hour of 13. He was most particular upon this point. I had laughed then, I do not laugh now. The house received me, as one might receive a stranger one fears to admit, reluctantly, with cold and groaning hospitality. The hall was vast, and lined with paintings whose painted eyes appeared to follow my candle. Dust lay upon every surface like a fine grey shroud, and the air carried that peculiar sweet decay of a place too long shut from the sun. Each of my footsteps was answered by another, faint, slightly delayed, as though some lingering tenant walked beside me, just out of view. In the parlour, beneath an oil portrait of my uncle, stood a tall case clock of black walnut and tarnished brass. It was, even to my untrained eye, a thing of singular and unsettling craftsmanship. Its face bore not 12 numerals but 13, etched in a script I could not read, and its pendulum, heavier and longer than reason permitted, swung with a slow, deliberate gravity. The hands stood frozen at 3 minutes before midnight. There was no sound. The clock, by every appearance, had not run in many years. I had retired, perhaps an hour later, when from below there came a sudden and shattering peal. The clock, silent these long years, had begun to strike. 1, 2, 3. I rose from my bed and went to the door. 4, 5, 6. The strokes moved through the house like a slow tide of cold iron. 10, 11, 12. I held my breath. And then a 13th stroke, deeper than the rest, that rang not in my ears, but in the marrow of my bones. Sleep was now a country close to me. I descended the great staircase, and there in the parlour I found, upon the writing desk, a small bundle of letters which had not been there before. The hand was my uncle's, I knew it from the will. The seals were of black wax. From the corners of the room came whisperings, soft and indistinguishable, as of many voices in earnest debate just beneath the threshold of sense. I gathered the letters trembling and bore them to the candlelight. They were leaves torn from his journal. He had purchased the clock, he wrote, from a dealer in Prague, who refused to take payment and asked only that he sign a paper relinquishing his name. Each night thereafter, the clock had struck 13, and at each 13th stroke, a year had been demanded of him, not of his life, but of his sleep, his sanity, his soul. It is not a clock, the last page read. It is a mouth. It does not measure time, it eats it. I raised my eyes from the page, and in the great mirror above the mantel I saw a thing that should not have been. Behind my shoulder stood a figure, tall, narrow, draped in mourning black, its face turned aside as if it could not bear to be looked upon. I spun. The room was empty. I turned again to the glass, and there it remained, patient and still, watching me from a chamber that did not exist. My candle flame bowed low, though I felt no breath of wind. Some compulsion drew me to the clock. I unlatched its long, thin door, and the smell that issued forth was not of brass and oil and ancient wood, but of damp earth, and beneath that of something older. The case was hollow far beyond its outward measure. Within, suspended upon delicate wires, were small white objects which the candle revealed at last, and which I cannot yet bring myself to name plainly. They were bones, finger bones set as counterweights, each one polished by long use. I staggered backward, and the figure from the mirror was at the foot of the stair. It had a face now. It was my uncle's face, but younger, and wrong in a way I could not articulate, as though it had been remembered rather than worn. He raised a finger to lips that did not move and pointed slowly at the clock. I understood then. I was not the inheritor of his estate. I was the inheritor of his appointment. The pendulum had begun to swing of its own accord. Its arc grew with each pass, sweeping wider than the case should allow, and yet the case did not break, rather, the room around it seemed to give way. The walls leaned, the floor tilted, the candles guttered into ribbons of pale green flame. With each swing the air grew colder, and with each swing I heard, distinctly, the soft drawing of a breath that was not my own, long, patient, and satisfied. I tried to flee, the hall stretched. I tried to scream. The sound was drunk by the walls before it left my throat. The portraits leaned forward in their frames. The eyes of my uncle, painted in oils some 40 years before his death, were wet and full of pity. I understood at last what he had purchased and what he had passed to me. I understood why no servants remained. I understood why the gates had been already open. And then from below, the clock began once more to strike. 1, 2, 3. I knelt upon the cold floor. 4, 5, 6. The pendulum's breath was at my neck. 10, 11, 12. There would be one more. I closed my eyes, and in the perfect darkness behind my lids I saw, with terrible clarity, the dial of the clock and the place where, at long last, my own name was now etched in that unreadable script. 13. They will find Ravenhurst as they have always found it. Silent, dust-blanketed, its great clock standing at 3 minutes before midnight, its hands unmoving, its case sealed. They will find no body. They will find, perhaps, a single sheet of paper upon which a stranger's hand has written this account. And in some unmarked Prague salon, a dealer who takes no payment will smile and unwrap a small white object, polished by long use, and add it gently to a pendulum that swings and swings and swings.